but that word at the end of the title is the whole reading. Everything before it describes what they are going through. Everything after it, the part I am going to spend this reading filling in, is about you, about where you stand, about what the position you now occupy actually requires of you in terms of clarity, discernment, and the specific unapologetic quality of self-possession that this situation is asking you to bring. They are losing it, but you do not have to. Let me describe what losing it looks like from inside this person right now, because losing it is not a vague concept in this reading. It has a specific, daily, cannot be ignored texture that I want to give you before we go anywhere else. They cannot settle. The specific quality of someone whose ordinary capacity to organize their own interior has been disrupted by the specific reality of your absence. Who reaches for the usual mechanisms of self-management, the distraction, the redirection of attention, the rational argument against continuing to think about someone you chose not to prioritize, and finds that those mechanisms are producing significantly diminished results than they have produced in previous situations. This has not happened to them before, not like this. They have ended things before, or let things fade, or moved on from people in the way that people like them move on, which is to say, without particular difficulty and without lasting disruption to the ordinary functioning of their daily life. They have a model of how getting over someone works, how long it takes, what it feels like. What the arc of it is, this situation is not following the model. You are not following the model. You keep appearing in the model's place in the moments when the model says the disruption should be diminishing, when the ordinary forgetting process should be producing its results. There you are, specific, vivid, undiminished, as present in their interior as you were when you were present in their life. This is making them lose it. I want to speak to the hot and cold specifically because the title names it and it deserves its examination before we talk about what it means for where things stand now. Hot and cold is not randomness. It is not the behavior of someone who does not know what they want, or who is confused about their feelings, or who is operating without awareness of the effect of the inconsistency on the person on the receiving end. It is a strategy. The specific, practiced, often unconscious strategy of someone who has learned to manage relationships from a position of control rather than from a position of genuine engagement, who keeps the other person in a state of slight uncertainty because uncertainty is what maintains the dynamic they prefer, who offers warmth in exactly the quantities required to keep the other person engaged, and withdraws at exactly the moments where engagement might transition into the genuine intimacy that genuine intimacy requires. Control dressed as inconsistency. You experience this, and at a certain point, you stopped playing, not with a dramatic announcement, not with a confrontation designed to produce a particular response from them. You simply stopped being available to the dynamic in the specific way the dynamic required. You stopped being organized around the uncertainty. You stopped calibrating your own availability and your own emotional investment to the signals they were sending. You left the orbit, and that leaving, that specific, clean, not explained to them quality of simply no longer being where the orbit was, is what is producing the losing it. You left the orbit, and that leaving, that specific, clean, not explained to them quality of simply no longer being where the orbit was, is what is producing the losing it. I want to describe what the leaving looked like from their perspective, because understanding the shock of it from their side helps explain the intensity of the losing it. They were not prepared for a genuine departure. They were prepared for the version of departure that people in dynamics like this one typically produce, the angry departure that contains within it the seeds of return, the departure that comes with an announcement of the departure designed to produce a particular response, the departure that is really a bid for a different kind of attention. What you did was different from any of those. You simply stopped without announcement, without the specific readable quality of someone who is leaving in order to be followed, without the signal that said, "Come after me," which is the signal that people like them know how to read and respond to. You left in a way that communicated nothing about what would make you come back, because you were not leaving to produce a result. You were leaving because the leaving was the honest thing to do. And that quality of leaving, the quality that does not contain within it the implicit invitation to be followed, is the one that produces the specific, disoriented, model failing quality of the losing it they are currently inside. Let me be specific about what the losing it is made of, because losing it contains several distinct components, and understanding each one separately gives you a clearer picture of what you are actually dealing with. The first component is want, genuine want. Not the performative want of someone who simply dislikes losing access to something they had. The actual specific directed at you want of someone who has been trying to locate in other places what existed in the connection with you and who has been systematically failing to locate it. You produce something in them that they have not been able to reproduce elsewhere. Not because you were trying to be irreplaceable, because what you genuinely are is not something that can be approximated by someone who is simply available and who did not produce the specific combination of qualities that you produced. The want is real. The second component is frustration at themselves. The particular, slightly embarrassing quality of someone who is sitting inside consequences that their own behavior created. Who knows, in the honest moments they cannot fully escape, that the losing it is the direct result of how they chose to operate when they had access to what they are now losing it over. That the hot and cold was a choice, that the selfishness was a pattern they operated from, because the pattern had not previously produced consequences they could not manage until now. The third component is the thing they will not easily admit: humility. The specific, uncomfortable, entirely new to them quality of being in a position where they want something they cannot simply take, where the usual approach, the mixture of charm and withdrawal and the confident expectation that what they want will eventually be available, because it always has been eventually available, is not producing results. You are not producing results for the approach. And the absence of results for someone accustomed to producing results is profoundly destabilizing. The third component is the thing they will not easily admit: humility. The specific, uncomfortable, entirely new to them quality of being in a position where they want something they cannot simply take, where the usual approach, the mixture of charm and withdrawal, and the confident expectation that what they want will eventually be available, because it always has been eventually available, is not producing results. You are not producing results for the approach. And the absence of results for someone accustomed to producing results is profoundly destabilizing. I want to describe what all three components together feel like in their daily experience, because the combination of genuine want and self-directed frustration and new humility creates a specific, uncomfortable, distinctly unpleasant interior state that I think you deserve the full picture of. It is constant, not the episodic quality of ordinary longing that surfaces occasionally and then recedes. The specific, continuous, cannot be set down quality of something that is present in the background of every other activity that colors the texture of ordinary days. That makes things that should be neutral feel slightly inadequate because there is always this other thing present making the comparison. They are not comfortable, not in a way they can manage with their usual tools. And the inability to manage it with their usual tools is the most significant piece of what is happening. Because the inability to manage something means encountering its actual size, means sitting inside it without the relief of the management working, means understanding from the inside of the experience exactly how large the thing actually is, rather than the reduced version that management usually produces. The thing, it turns out, is very large, larger than they expected, larger than they are accustomed to carrying, and that size is information. I want to speak now to the but, because the but is the most important word in this reading, and it is time to give it its full content. They want you back. The want is real. I have described its components, and they are genuine. The losing it is genuine. The specific, ongoing, cannot be managed quality of what your absence has produced in them is not a performance or a strategy or a calculated attempt to re-engage you through the display of suffering. It is real, and it does not matter. Not in the sense of being irrelevant to your compassion for another human being, not in the sense of being something you should be unmoved by or something you should feel nothing about. It matters as information. It matters as evidence of what the connection was and what its absence has produced. But it does not create an obligation. That is the but. That the reality of what they are experiencing does not obligate you to resolve their experience by returning to an arrangement that did not serve you. That genuine wanting, even genuine losing it, even the genuine unprecedented quality of what this particular absence has produced in a person who has not previously experienced this is not sufficient grounds for overlooking the specific documented pattern level quality of how they operated when they had you. The hot and cold was a choice. Choices have consequences. The consequence in this case is not that they lose you permanently necessarily. The consequence is that whether you return is entirely, completely, with no obligation to them, yours to determine. Tell me in the comments if you are sitting with this. If the person I have been describing, the specific combination of genuinely wanting you and having a documented pattern of behavior that made being with them costly, is someone you are navigating right now, tell me where you are in this. I want to speak to what this person would need to demonstrate before the but could be revisited, not as a checklist you are required to maintain, as a genuine, honest account of what the distance between where things are and where they would need to be for a return to be worth your consideration actually contains. Changed behavior, not changed language, not an apology that describes the pattern accurately and names what it cost you and expresses genuine remorse for having operated that way. Words can do all of that without changing anything about the underlying behavior pattern that produced them. Changed behavior is different. Changed behavior is what you can see rather than what you are told. It is the consistency of someone operating differently over a period of time rather than the quality of a single conversation. It is the specific, documented over time evidence that the hot and cold has been replaced by something else, something that does not require you to monitor your own emotional investment in proportion to their fluctuating availability, something that is simply there, not because you demanded it, because they worked in their own interior on the thing that produced the pattern, because they have done enough genuine reckoning with what they have been doing and why to have actually changed the relationship they have to the behavior rather than simply the behavior's expression. That is the high bar. It is the appropriate bar, and it is not currently being met simply by the losing it. Let me speak to something about your current position that I want you to understand clearly. You are not in a position of waiting. There is a version of this situation that positions you as someone whose current stance is a posture, a specific calculated withholding of something they want in order to produce a particular behavior in them, a strategy of your own, mirroring their hot and cold back at them until they arrive at whatever demonstration is required. That is not what your position is. Your position is not strategic. It is not about producing a particular behavior in them. It is the natural result of someone who has genuinely exited an arrangement that was not serving them and who is now simply living their life without the arrangement. The power of your position does not come from holding something back. It comes from not needing to hold anything, from not being organized around whether they demonstrate sufficiently, from the specific, self-sufficient, my life continues regardless quality of someone who has their own center of gravity and who is not tilted toward another person's orbit simply because that orbit is expressing its pull more forcefully than before. Your center of gravity is yours. Do not let the losing it displace it. I want to speak to the selfishness piece because the title names it, and I do not want to leave it unaddressed. The selfishness is a pattern, not a character flaw in the dramatic, unchangeable, written into the person permanently sense. A pattern, a way of operating in relationships that was built from something, probably from the specific personal history of someone who learned that prioritizing their own needs and their own experience at the expense of their partners was acceptable because it had been accepted, because previous partners had accommodated it, because the specific combination of charm and intensity and the occasional warmth of the hot phase had been sufficient to retain people even when the cold phase was costly. The pattern was never effectively challenged until you are the first person in some significant time, possibly ever in the context of their romantic life, who has not accommodated the pattern, who has not moderated their own needs and their own self-respect to fit within the space the pattern left available, who has simply left when the pattern made, leaving the more honest choice. That is a new experience for them. And new experiences, when they are in the territory of something as fundamental as the pattern of how you relate to people who care about you, have the potential to produce change. Not guaranteed to. Potential. The difference between potential and actuality is the work they would need to do on the interior that produced the pattern. Only they can do that work. And whether they have done it or are in the process of doing it or are simply sitting in the discomfort of the losing it without having begun the actual work is something that only demonstrated over time behavior can answer. Words cannot answer it, only what they actually do. As we close, I want to give you the full picture of what the but actually protects. Not from them, for you. The but protects the version of yourself that exists right now, the one that was built partly through the experience of being in an arrangement that required the accommodation of hot and cold and the management of a selfishness that was never going to be moderated by your accommodation of it. That learned through real experience with real costs what it means to organize yourself around someone else's inconsistency. That version knows something. It knows what that costs. It knows the specific daily energy consuming quality of remaining emotionally available to someone who may or may not be emotionally available at any given moment. It knows the particular exhaustion of recalibrating constantly in response to fluctuating signals from someone who is using the fluctuation to maintain control of the dynamic. It does not want to go back to that. And the but is how it stays out of it. Not as punishment for them, not as the calculated withholding of something they want until they demonstrate sufficiently, as the simple, self-respecting, non-negotiable quality of someone who has a clear picture of what the prior arrangement cost and who has decided that a return to that cost requires evidence that it would be a different arrangement. That clarity is yours. It was built at your expense. It is yours to keep, and it is the most powerful thing in the room right now. More powerful than the losing it, more powerful than the want, more powerful than anything they are currently feeling or expressing or offering, because it is not about them at all. It is entirely about you. And being entirely about you is the only position from which the right decision about this person becomes available, not the decision that manages their losing it, the decision that serves your actual life